Day I found out I was standing in the parking garage of the Marriott in downtown Columbus, Ohio with a half-eaten turkey sandwich in one hand and my phone in the other. My wife had texted me at 12:47 p.m. Lunch with the girls. Probably won't be home until 3. I remember reading it and not thinking twice. I typed back, "Sounds good, drive safe." The way you do after 31 years of marriage when certain things just become reflex. Then I walked back toward the elevator, pushed the button for the lobby, and stepped out into the hotel restaurant. She was sitting by the window. Not with the girls. With him. I want to be very careful about how I tell this story, because I've told it in my head 1,000 times, and it keeps coming out wrong. Either too angry or too clinical. The truth is somewhere in the middle. The truth is I stood there for about 4 seconds, long enough for my brain to process what my eyes were seeing, and then I walked to a table on the opposite side of the room, sat down with my back to them, and finished my sandwich. I didn't make a scene. I am 58 years old. I am a retired civil engineer. I spent 3 decades building things that were meant to last. Bridges, drainage systems, flood retention walls. I know how to look at a structure, find the point of failure, and decide whether it can be reinforced or whether it needs to come down entirely. I looked at what I saw in that restaurant window, and I knew. My name isn't important. You can call me Ray. That's what my father called me, short for Raymond. And my father was the kind of man who believed you handled your problems quietly and with dignity. And I have tried my whole life to be that kind of man. My wife's name is Vivian. We met in 1993 at a 4th of July cookout in Dayton. She was 26. I was 27. She had this laugh that made everyone in the room turn around just to see who was having that much fun. I fell in love with her laugh before I ever learned her last name. We built a life the way most people do. Slowly, imperfectly, with a lot of compromise and a lot of forgiveness. We raised 2 kids. We bought a house in Westerville that needed more work than either of us expected. We lost my mother and then our father within 14 months of each other, and we held each other through both of those. We had good years and hard years, and I always believed, I truly believed, that when you make a vow in front of God and your family, you keep it. The man by the window was named Derek. He was the senior vice president of operations at the nonprofit where Vivian worked as a financial manager. She had mentioned him over the years the way you mention a colleague, casually in passing. Derek approved the new budget timeline. Derek wants to restructure the department. I had met him once, at their annual gala 2 years back. He shook my hand. He had a firm handshake and a nice watch, and the kind of easy confidence that comes from money or from never having been told no. I sat with my back to them for 45 minutes. I ate my sandwich. I drank my water. At one point the server came by and asked if I wanted anything else, and I said no, just the check. And my voice came out completely normal. I was surprised by that. I paid. I walked back to the parking garage. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes. Then I drove home, and I started to think. The first thing I did was go back through 6 months of our joint bank statements. I want to say this clearly. I was not a suspicious husband before that afternoon. I had no reason to be. Vivian and I shared finances the way we shared everything, openly, with a general understanding that we were both honest people. She managed the household accounts. I handled the investment side. We reviewed things together every quarter, loosely. The kind of arrangement that works fine until it doesn't. The statements were pulled up on my laptop by 9 o'clock that evening. Vivian was downstairs watching television. I told her I had a headache and was going to bed early, which was not entirely a lie. The first thing I noticed was a recurring charge I didn't recognize. A hotel called the Galleria Suites in the Short North neighborhood of Columbus. Every 3 to 4 weeks, going back at least 8 months. Always checked in on a Friday. Always checked out Saturday morning. The amounts ranged from $192 to $240. I cross-referenced our calendar. Every single one of those Fridays, Vivian had something on the schedule. Girls' night, conference, a friend's birthday, her college roommate visiting from Cincinnati. She had a whole parallel calendar running inside our real one. The hotel charges alone were close to $2,100. I kept going. There was a Visa card I didn't know about. It was linked to a secondary checking account that had been opened. I checked the date 3 times because I didn't believe it the first 11 years ago. Not recently. Not in the last year or two. 11 years ago when our youngest was still in middle school and I thought we were just a regular family trying to make ends meet. I don't know how long I sat at that desk. At some point I noticed the television had gone quiet downstairs and I heard Vivian come up the stairs and brush her teeth and get into bed. I listened to the sounds of our house the way you listen to something you're about to lose, and I sat very still and I kept reading. The secondary account had an average balance of about $14,000. Over the period, I could pull records for roughly 3 years. Approximately $47,000 had moved through it. Some of that was likely legitimate. Some of it was clearly not. There were transfers I couldn't trace. There were payments to a financial advisory firm I had never heard of. There was a single wire transfer of $8,500 to an LLC registered in Delaware. I wrote everything down in a legal pad I found in my home office drawer. The same legal pad I'd used for project notes going back years, with my handwriting from a different version of my life filling up half the pages. I did not sleep that night. I spent the next 3 weeks doing something that felt deeply strange and deeply necessary at the same time. I was still Ray. I still came down for breakfast. I still asked Vivian about her day. I still sat beside her on the couch on Sunday afternoons. I watched her laugh at things on television. That same laugh that had turned my head at a cookout in 1993, and I felt something I can only describe as grief. Except the person I was grieving was still sitting right next to me. I hired a CPA I had worked with professionally, a woman named Sandra who had helped me with some estate planning after my mother passed. I called her on a Tuesday morning from my truck in the parking lot of a Home Depot. I told her I needed a private financial audit. I told her I was sensitive. She didn't ask me to explain further. She just said, "Send me what you have." What Sandra found took another 2 weeks. She was methodical, careful, exactly what I needed. The $8,500 wire transfer to the Delaware LLC was the most significant finding. That LLC, it turned out, had been set up as a holding company for a real estate investment that Derek had arranged for several private investors. Vivian had contributed capital from our joint savings without my knowledge. The investment had performed poorly. Most of the money was gone. Sandra also found that Vivian had withdrawn $6,200 in cash from our joint savings account over an 18-month period. Small amounts, always under $500, spread out so they wouldn't trigger any review. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had worked in nonprofit finance for 20 years. She knew how money moved and how to make it not be noticed. The total I could document, what had genuinely left our shared finances without my knowledge or consent, was $31,400. $31,400. I sat with that number for a long time. My daughter called me the week I got Sandra's report. She's 28 now, lives in Denver, works in healthcare. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing, her apartment, a trip she was planning, some situation with a coworker. I laughed at the right moments. I asked the right questions. When we hung up, I sat in the kitchen for a long time afterward, thinking about the fact that she had no idea, thinking about what it was going to mean for her when she did. I need to tell you something about Derek, because what Sandra found at the end changed the whole shape of the story. He was not just Vivian's boyfriend, if that's even the right word for it. He had done this before. Not with Vivian specifically, but the pattern of a private LLC, the pooled investment funds, the women connected to him financially over time. Sandra flagged it. She said she wasn't making accusations, but she thought I should know that 2 other transfers to that same Delaware LLC could be traced back with some searching to other individuals who appeared to have personal connections to Derek. I did not make that call to a lawyer myself. I made it to an attorney named Margaret who was recommended to me by a colleague, and I told her what I had, and she listened for a long time, and then she said, "Ray, this isn't just a divorce case. This may be a securities matter." It took another 6 weeks after that for things to move in that direction. I was not the one who filed the complaint. Margaret connected me with an attorney who handled financial fraud cases, and the process took on its own momentum from there. I stayed out of it as much as I could. I gave them documents. I answered questions. I let people who knew what they were doing do what they knew how to do. I want to be honest about something here. During those weeks, I had moments where I almost stopped everything. You spend 31 years with someone, and there is a part of you that does not want to believe the documents in front of your face, even when the documents are very clear. There were mornings when I came downstairs and Vivian was in the kitchen making coffee and the sun was coming through the window the way it has for 20 years. And I thought, maybe I'm wrong about something. Maybe there's an explanation I haven't thought of, but I kept coming back to the same thing. 11 years. That second account had been open for 11 years. Whatever else I didn't know for certain, I knew that. I waited until a Sunday evening in late October. The kids were not there. I had spoken to both of them earlier that week and told them, without details, that their mother and I were going through some serious difficulties and I wanted them to hear it from me first. My daughter cried. My son went quiet in the way he goes quiet when he doesn't know what to say, which has been his way since he was 9 years old. I sat Vivian down at the kitchen table. I put the legal pad in front of her. I put Sandra's report beside it. I told her I was not there to argue, that I was not going to raise my voice, and that I had one question I wanted her to answer honestly before I said anything else. She looked at the papers. She looked at me. "How long?" I asked. "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer for a long time. When she finally spoke, she said, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen the way it did." "That's not an answer to the question I asked." I told her so. She said, 4 years. 4 years. I thought about where I was 4 years ago. I had just retired. We had thrown a party in the same house. She gave a toast. She talked about what we were going to do together. Travel. More time with the grandkids someday. All of it. She stood in front of our friends and family and talked about the next chapter, and the whole time she'd been 4 months into whatever this was. I'm not a man who shows emotion easily. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, but I want to be honest with you right now. I put my hand flat on that kitchen table, and I had to breathe for a moment before I could continue. That's the part nobody tells you. You do all the preparation, all the legal work, all the documentation. You think you're ready. And then the actual number comes out of her mouth, and it still hits you somewhere you didn't know was exposed. I told her what I knew. All of it. I told her what Sandra had found, what the attorney was pursuing, what Derek's situation appeared to be. I watched her face change as I talked, moving through something I can only describe as the realization that the wall she had been standing behind for 4 years was no longer there. She asked if this could be handled privately. I told her that some of it was out of my hands now. She asked about the children. I told her I had already spoken to both of them. She was quiet for a very long time after that. Eventually she said, "I'm sorry, Ray." I told her I believed she was. I told her that it didn't change anything. The divorce took 8 months. It was not friendly, but it was not vicious either. Vivian's attorney and Margaret worked through most of the details without too much courtroom drama. The secondary account funds, the undisclosed investment, the $6,200 in documented cash withdrawals, all of it was factored into the settlement. I also received the house, which I had debated, but in the end I had lived there for 22 years and I was not going to be the one to leave. Derek's situation moved separately and on the longer timeline. I am not going to pretend I followed every detail of it because I had enough of my own to manage. What I can tell you is that the securities complaint was taken seriously, that his employment at the nonprofit ended, and that his own marriage, I learned through Margaret's office, had apparently already been in the process of dissolving before any of this became formal. My son took about 6 months to come around. He had always been close with his mother, and I understood that this was hard for him in ways that had nothing to do with the choices she had made. He called me on a Thursday night in March, and we talked for almost 2 hours. He didn't apologize exactly, that's not his way, but he told me he was proud of how I had handled things. Coming from him, that meant everything. My daughter was the one who suggested the trip. She flew in from Denver in April and we spent a long weekend driving through the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia. We stopped at overlooks and ate at roadside diners, and I let myself just exist in the scenery for a while, without thinking about documents or timelines or settlement terms. On the second evening, sitting outside a diner somewhere in North Carolina, she reached across the table and put her hand over mine and said, "Dad, you know you're going to be okay, right?" I told her I was starting to believe that. I am not going to wrap this up with a lesson. I don't think I'm in a position to offer lessons about marriage or trust or how to know when something is wrong. I missed it for 11 years. I missed it while building bridges and raising children and sitting on my couch on Sunday afternoons. What I will tell you is this. There's a version of this story where I walked into that hotel restaurant and made a scene, where I walked up to that window table and said something I couldn't take back, where the whole thing exploded in front of strangers over half-eaten lunch plates. I didn't do that. I ate my sandwich, I paid my check, I went home and I thought, and then I worked, and then I waited until I had everything I needed. 31 years of marriage taught me a lot of things, some of which turned out not to be true. But the thing my father taught me about handling your problems quietly and with dignity, that one held up. I'm 60 now. I have a house I know every corner of. I have 2 kids who call me. I have Sunday afternoons that are mine to fill however I choose. And I am still figuring out what that looks like. And some days that is the hardest part. And some days it feels like the beginning of something. I'll let you know how it goes. People ask me sometimes, not often because I don't talk about this much in person, whether I regret waiting as long as I did before confronting her, whether those 3 weeks of sitting across the breakfast table, acting normal, asking about her day, were some kind of weakness. They weren't, and I think that distinction matters more than people realize. There is a version of strength that looks loud, that raises its voice and breaks things and demands to be seen. I understand why people respect that version. It feels honest. It feels immediate. But I have spent a lot of years watching what that kind of reaction actually produces, and most of the time what it produces is chaos that the other person walks away from while you're still standing in it. The kind of strength I'm talking about is quieter and, honestly, harder. It is the strength to be in pain and still think clearly. To know something devastating and choose not to act on it until you understand what you're actually dealing with. Vivian had been building something for 11 years, a second account, a second life running parallel to ours. And if I had walked up to that hotel window and made a scene, she would have had time to prepare. Time to move money, to get her story straight, to control the narrative. I would have handed her the one thing she needed, a warning. I didn't do that. Not because I wasn't hurt, I was, but because I understood that being hurt and being smart are not mutually exclusive, and that the moment I let the pain make my decisions for me, I was going to lose something I couldn't get back. What Vivian did had consequences that came from the choices she made over a very long time. Not from one bad moment, not from a single lapse in judgment, but from 11 years of daily decisions to deceive someone who trusted her. That's what I kept coming back to when things got hard during those 3 weeks, the sheer accumulation of it. You don't end up with a hidden account and a secret investment and $31,000 quietly redirected by accident. You end up there because every day you chose to take another step in that direction and told yourself it was fine. Consequences work the same way. They accumulate, and they arrive whether you're ready for them or not. Sandra found what she found because she was good at her job and because I asked her to look. Margaret knew what to do because I came to her with documentation instead of emotion. The outcome of this story was not luck. It was the result of one decision made clearly under pressure, to think before acting, followed by weeks of methodical, patient work. I am not telling you this because I think I handled everything perfectly. I didn't sleep for the first 2 nights. I had moments where I almost said something at the wrong time. I sat in a parking lot for 20 minutes after seeing them together because I didn't trust my hands to be steady on the wheel yet. None of that was graceful. But I kept thinking about my father. He was not a complicated man. He believed that how you behave when things go wrong tells you more about yourself than how you behave when things go right. He believed you owed it to yourself to act in a way you could look back on without shame. I am 60 years old. I have been through something I would not wish on anyone, and I can look back on how I handled it, not perfectly, but with intention and with honesty, and feel like I remained the person I wanted to be. That's not nothing. In fact, right now, that feels like most of it.